Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today I've got a lovely lady with me. Oh, you're allowed to say that nowadays. Anyway, an illustrious
Why not?
career, 30 years, 30 years with the NHS. It's Dr. Jen Unwin. Hello, Jen.
Hello, Stephen. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, just for you, actually, Jen, if the picture goes a bit fuzzy, the software tends to make it better, so don't worry about it going a bit fuzzy.
Righty.
Um, right. Now, Jen is one of my Well, I'm a bit of a fanboy of both Jen and David because I think they've been doing some really great work. And I want to talk about that great work. Simple as that. So, I mean, you've worked extensively with patients transitioning to low carb and
hmm
keto and even carnivore.
Yeah.
What are the improvements that you tend to see?
Oh goodness me. I mean, this is why we've stuck at it so long, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, for those people that don't know, we started it must be about 15 years ago now. So he's a GP. He was thoroughly depressed at being a GP, thinking of retiring. So it would have been, because he's 67 now, it would have been like 52 or something like that. Um, just miserable about the fact that people were getting sicker and sicker. There was more and more people in the practice with type 2 diabetes. People were getting more and more overweight, more chronic pain. I mean, it was just we all know what's going on. And he was like, right, I'm gonna quit. And I was still working in the NHS at the time, and my role was really I'd always worked in physical health settings, so it was about helping people to live the best possible life they could with whatever chronic or acute condition they had, whether it was disfigurement, cancer, chronic pain. That was what I've done all my career, really. And so I said to, and I'm a solution focused therapist. So I said to David, what if you were going to retire on a high, or if you were going to do one last thing that made a difference, what that might be? And I'd already just discovered low carb eating for myself because I've got my own history, or lifelong, of yo-yo dieting, overeating, not being able to control my own eating behavior. Just discovered low carb and was sort of a new one of these new. It's like when people give up smoking. I was trying to make everybody, I was so passionate about it from what I'd experienced myself. We came up with doing a project which was involve helping people at the practice, and we started with people with pre-diabetes. We were a bit too scaredy cat to go full type 2, but with pre-diabetes, to essentially adopt a low carbohydrate diet, and kind of see what happened. We thought that would be a cheerful thing to do. We did it in our own time in the evening because the partners at the practice thought we were bonkers. The dietitian at the practice walked out and never came back. She wouldn't even speak about doing it. So we were like, okay, interesting. So also I've worked most of my career was sort of joint clinical posts and academic posts. I love thinking about what I'm doing all the time and what works for whom and why. So I said to David, right, we're gathering data right from the start, and also it would keep us safe because, yes, we suddenly realized we were going to start getting accused of killing people basically by doing something so radical. So off we went, and we had 13 patients volunteer who had pre-diabetes, and the results were still, I mean, we couldn't believe it at the time. Patients themselves couldn't believe it. The progress that people were making, that's been written up, you know, back in the day, and quite a few of those patients still come to the group that we run now and are still in remission. In fact, David's just filmed with Rangan Chatterjee. He's doing a new series. Hopefully, it'll come out. And one of the patients um, who's going to be featured was one of those people who reversed his pre-diabetes, came off stacks of medication, and lost about 8 stone in weight. So he did incredibly well, Chris, and he's been an
Wow.
advocate and a supporter of other patients ever since. So I mean, that just gave us the motivation to carry on. So what we saw was, yeah, people quickly reversing metabolic disease, coming out of the pre-diabetic range. We quickly started, well, I should say David really, because he would be, him and the other doctors would be recruiting then people with diabetes to join. But also, yeah, people improving mental health symptoms, skin disorders, fatty liver was one. We had quite a few patients who weren't overweight or didn't even actually have diabetes, but had very bad liver function tests and would go to the endocrinologists and be accused of uh, lying about how much they drank and things like that.
Hmm.
And that's something that quite quickly reverses as well once people start restricting their sugars and refined carbohydrates. So uh, then it was just a no-brainer really. And then David suddenly refound his passion for medicine and is still going strong at 67. He's got no plans to stop. He works 2 days a week and still sees lots of patients. So as I say, we still run the groups. And then over time, partly because of my own experiences, I've got more interested in the food addiction piece and story, and how that contributes to people um eating in a way that makes them ill and unwell, and what we can do about that. So it's been an amazing, yeah, it's been an amazing 15 years, and still going strong.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned that you're focusing more on the sugar addiction, which is admirable. Do you think it has a huge impact on people's mental health? And if so, what do you see? Do you see anxiety or depression, those sort of things?
Hmm. I mean, yeah, both really. And what you find is that people tend to say, um, in fact, David had a patient the other day. He was just discussing with me some of the details that that who was saying, I'm so depressed because of all this other stuff that's on in my life. I can't give up the biscuits or the bread. I need that because that's the only thing that's cheering me up, kind of thing. And I think that's the more I work in this space, the more I see that that's the wrong way round, and that's the addiction. That's the addiction telling you that. And actually, quite often when people we're able to encourage people to quit those foods, um, they feel so much better mentally, and all of their other troubles, though they don't go away, but they can just cope with them better. And this we know, kind of what's going on in the brain, basically, that's making that happen. And that the more and more of these foods that we eat, actually the worse and worse of a hole we get in, like that, like it is kind of feels like the only thing that's keeping you going, or the only pleasure that you have in life. And that's addiction. That's how it plays out. And we just make that comparison to alcohol. And
Hmm.
we've either personally had that experience or know people who've got in that same cycle of, drinking to sort of to help, ease some sort of mental pain, but then being in a situation where they're having to drink almost just to get through the day. So it becomes not that you feel better, but that you're just drinking to get to function, basically. And it's the same old story as it is with sugar and ultra processed foods. Um, that it becomes the thing that people pursue to kind of get through the day. So I mean, the
Yeah.
comparison is just so clear, and all the physiology and neuropsychology is exactly the same.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, people are going into survival mode, basically, and
Mm.
getting through the day. You snuck in there that we know what's going on in the brain.
Mhm.
Would you want
Yeah.
to
So
share a
what's
little
going
bit
on in the
of
brain?
that?
Yeah. So, sugars and ultra processed foods didn't exist really, until very recent times in terms of our evolution. So, uh, the brain didn't evolve to deal with the amount of sugar and processed carbohydrates and other weird things that we eat on a regular basis, or some people eat on a regular basis. The neurotransmitter that's involved in addiction is, I mean, there's a number. There's it. The main one, let's say, is dopamine, that people have probably heard of, and it's the reward motivation neurotransmitter, and it's vital to our survival. It was about, making you get up in the morning and go hunt your woolly mammoth or whatever it was, and you had to be pretty driven to go and do that because it's a bit of a dangerous thing to go and do. So it's involved in a lot of survival behaviors, dopamine and motivation, and so on. And what happens when we have a load of sugar or a bowl of cornflakes or a pizza is that we get this sort of dopamine reward in the brain, but it's sort of abnormally high. It's you're sort of abnormally stimulated by those foods. And everything in nature is always trying to keep in balance, isn't it? Particularly the body has
Yes.
many mechanisms, and the brain has many mechanisms for trying to keep a sort of homeostasis going on. And so what seems to happen is that the receptors for dopamine, so in terms of sort of transferring neurotransmitters, they're released into a space and then they are then picked up by the next neuron axon.
Hmm.
But what happens is that some receptors for dopamine at the reception end are sort of blocked off, really, like the key's in the lock and it's not going to open. So that even though there's a lot of dopamine around, the messages aren't getting through. So it's a little bit like insulin resistance, but it's a sort of
Hmm.
dopamine resistance, if you like. So obviously that's not great because dopamine is about motivation and reward. So the more and more that process happens, the less and less motivation and rewards people are going to experience because the dopamine receptors have been sort of down-regulated, as they say. So that means that over time, you're losing motivation, you're losing a sense of reward in life. And that's what it looks like when people are depressed. They don't feel motivated to do anything other than the thing which they have experienced in the past to get that bit of reward, that bit of motivation. They're going to keep sort of pursuing that. As we've already said, it sort of all becomes about the pizza or the biscuits or whatever it is. But food addicts tend to have a sort of a group of favorite foods which they return to and which they crave. So it might be, let's go for ice cream because that is a really common one,
Mm.
or chocolate. So they go back to you get the cravings and the compulsions because of the lack of dopamine. You get the cravings and compulsions to consume, let's say, the chocolate to get that little bit of dopamine. But it's a sort of diminishing return because every time you repeat that behavior, the brain is also blocking out some of the dopamine
Yeah.
receptors. So it's a sort of horrible, vicious cycle, downward spiral,
Yeah.
trying to get that little hit. And as I say, it becomes where you don't actually get any kind of hit. You're just trying to function through the day. So like any addiction. So serotonin's also involved. So you get a similar thing where, serotonin is raised by those foods, but that means that, over time, the receptors aren't working as well. So, and serotonin we know is the kind of happy, relaxed neurotransmitter, and it's the one, that they put in antidepressants to try and sort of raise the levels of serotonin. But of course, the brain adjusts to that anyway. So again,
Yes.
that you're just looking for this way to feel better, and it
Yeah.
becomes through the substance that you're craving, which in the case we're talking about is um, certain foods that are very high in sugars and carbohydrates, because they give us that same. So it's exactly the same process in the brain. And in fact, if you look at scans of people's brains with sort of obesity, food addiction, they don't look any different to someone who's got a drug or an alcohol problem.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what you say there, you so eloquently put the phrase dopamine resistance. I know it isn't really that, but
Yeah,
that image is interesting because that explains why people need more and more of a dose,
exactly.
because
That
you're trying to
tolerance
get back to
effect.
that hit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're trying to get back to that initial um kind of
High, I suppose.
euphoric recall. Yeah, it's a high. Yeah,
Yeah.
people call it sort of
Yeah.
euphoric recall. So you're
Mm.
trying to get back to that, but of course, because of that process, you never will. You're chasing something, chasing the dragon. You're never going to
Yeah.
get to that point because of the neurophysiology of it.
Mm. And I think that's human nature. I mean, this is why professional sports people seem to do badly after, retiring, because they miss that adulation
Yeah.
and the excitement and the buzz. And I think it's totally understandable, isn't it? If something makes you feel good, you're going to want
Mhm.
to get it, but then it becomes
Yeah.
detrimental.
Yeah.
Just a very basic question. What do you think it is about chocolate in particular that seems to do
Right. Well,
this?
the thing that seems to really get people is these sort of unnatural combinations of sugar and fat. And
Mm.
if you whack a bit of salt in as well, that seems to really do it. So things like Pringle, I mean,
Yeah.
which are literally designed, they literally designed them to be irresistible, put people in scanners and see what lights up the brain. And
Yeah.
add things, make it crunchy. There's other things that you can kind of manipulate to really get the brain lighting up. But again, rare or not at all in nature. These combinations of sugars and fats. Mm.
Yes, and I use that ever such a lot in my own consults when people start to feel a failure. I say, you're fighting scientists who are deliberately designing
Mm.
things to make you addicted,
Yes, yes.
hyperpalatable foods. So
Yeah,
you wouldn't have had this
very
problem.
much so. Yeah, yes, it's not. I always try and get people a bit kind of riled up about the fact it's not their fault. Like, we've all been manipulated, for profit essentially,
Yeah.
and our brains have been, are being kind of hijacked by those combinations of foods, because they know that, I mean, it's an addiction model basically. It's just like cigarettes all over again.
Yes.
They know these things are addictive. They market them to children. They get us hooked early. The bright packaging and all this. It's just the sides of a addiction kind of made into a business model.
Yeah, well, yeah, and people find it sometimes a little bit hard to believe. And I use my own example. If I had a video that suddenly got 1 million views, I would spend hours trying to work out, what did I do? What did I do in that one? And I will try to repeat that and do it more. So, I mean, it is just human nature. When you see a success, so a success for a chocolate bar is selling lots, people are going
Mm,
to say, right, well, that one was particularly successful.
yeah,
Let's find out why they did. I mean, to me,
people
it's really obvious. Spending,
love the money.
yes,
Yeah, of course.
yeah. So let's get a bit practical then.
Mm.
What are the strategies that you found effective to help people manage their addictions, or their behaviour? Actually, probably is a better way to put it.
Yeah, yeah, behavior and choices. I mean, I think number one,
Mm,
I think we've already hit on that. Is I think the education piece. I think if you can explain, it's a bit like David with his explaining in a simple way what happens in the body when you have sugar and refined carbohydrates, and why, if you're a type 2 diabetic, that's that's a bad idea, and then helping people to sort of eat differently. So it's similar really with the addiction side of things. Explaining to people what exactly as we've just done, right? What
mm,
what happens in the brain, and why we end up on that ridiculous treadmill, and
mm.
explaining that, and really explaining that, it's not their fault. It's not a personal weakness. that you do. I think
Mm.
people feel very ashamed. I did it, I was a psychologist who couldn't control my eating behavior. That wasn't a great place for me to be.
Mm.
And it's such a relief to think, oh, yes, I kind of now I understand my behavior and I have a model to understand it. So I think that's kind of number one, really. Then number two is obviously if it's addiction, we all know. I always come back to the alcohol um, analogy because everybody knows somebody, or as you've seen it in the movies, or you've had that experience yourself, like you say, of having more and needing more and more, and just going down that kind of hopeless route. So explaining that it's like that, and if it's like that, well, what is the or cigarettes, or what is the treatment for
Mhm.
addiction? And people know that the treatment at the end of the day is abstinence. However you get there, how are you going to get there? That's, there's maybe a few routes, but the end point has to be abstinence, because you've lost control of your behavior around that substance, and you're um you're not going to get that back once you've crossed that crossed the Rubicon. So
Mm.
this isn't everybody. So we're not talking about everybody. We're talking about people with they've properly got into that addiction cycle. They've lost control of their relationship with those foods. And we know from the research that's about 14% of the general population, but it's a lot bigger proportion of people with type 2 diabetes. And in fact, if you have food addiction, you're 7 times more likely to be type 2 diabetic, and about 3 times more likely to have mental health problems. So it's not everybody. So everybody who's listening, you don't have to be utterly abstinent. If you can do a bit of moderation, and have a bit of something, and get on with your day, there are some rare people who can do that. I mean, I don't think it's but David always says, how poisoned do you want to be? Do you want to be moderately poisoned or not at all poisoned? So, we'd all benefit from never eating. What's the reason for eating biscuits? And there's no reason, there's no nutritional reason. So we'd all benefit from quitting completely. But there's some people like me who are proper dyed in the wool food addicts who the treatment is abstinence, getting to abstinence and then maintaining it. And that's it's a lifelong condition. So a bit like type 2 diabetes. You can reverse your type 2 diabetes, you can get into drug-free remission with normal blood sugars. But if you start eating pizza and white rice in quantities again, you're going to get back to be type 2 diabetic. And it's the same with food addiction. You can, be abstinent for a while, but if you slip up and have that chocolate bar, what happens interestingly is that in the meantime, while you've been abstinent, your dopamine receptors have all opened up again, because obviously your brain's like, we need some we need some dopamine here. So the dopamine receptors are sort of refired up. So if you have 6 months abstinence and then you have a chocolate bar, then you do get a rather sort of blissful experience, because the dopamine receptors are kind of ready. And David and I did this, unfortunately, years and years ago. We went out for a Michelin meal after we'd not had sugar for, it would have been like that 6 months or something like that. And we both had the dessert. And we said we could literally hear popping in our brains, like ding, 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 like something mad was going on. And then we felt miserable for a couple of days afterwards, and didn't repeat that
Yeah.
experiment. So so people need to understand that abstinence is the treatment for food addiction, as it would be if you had an alcohol problem. And it's exactly as serious. I think people don't take it as seriously as it needs to be taken.
Yeah. Yes.
They're like, I'm a bit of a chocoholic, ha ha ha.
Mm.
Once you pop, you can't stop. It's not. It's not actually funny. It's people are making themselves incredibly sick, and
Mm.
incredibly miserable.
I think
So
that's
yeah,
I think that's something I wanted to touch on, because this is what I find, and I use this analogy quite a lot. many of the people I deal with, they say, "Oh, my family's not very supportive." And I say, "Well, if you were an alcoholic, they would be, because they
Yes.
get it. So they'd really support you. If you smoke too much, I think they pretty much get it and they support you." But
Yeah.
many people outside this
Yeah.
space don't really get it. So you're sort of on your own. I mean, do you focus
Yeah.
on getting people into a community, or
Yes.
do you speak to sort of the
It's the other
family?
big part of it. So once people have sort of accepted, they've understood it, they've accepted abstinence, they're hopefully either moving towards that or doing the cold turkey thing. You can go either route. But then, yeah, people do need a lot of support. And you're absolutely right that's why I do all the campaigning that I do, because I think the public and the medical community don't take it seriously enough. And yes, I mean, you'd never push alcohol on someone who's in recovery from alcoholism. You'd just be celebrating their you'd be buying them a whatever, a soda water or something. You wouldn't say have one whiskey because it's your birthday, but you get
Yeah.
that all the time in food addiction. People saying, "Oh, a little bit won't hurt," or "Don't be a misery." Or I think, yeah, there's two reasons for that. One is that we don't take it seriously enough, or it's not acknowledged that it is an addiction, and that's where the campaigning comes in. But also, it's like alcoholics don't like to drink alone. They'd always be buying other people drinks, or hanging out in bars, and to sort of normalize their behavior. It's the same, I think, that a lot of people have a food addiction problem, and they don't want to acknowledge it, which I completely understand. They're sort of in denial. So if you've got one in your family, they're going to try and push you back into consuming those things, because it kind of makes people. And I used to notice this all the time in the NHS, in offices, and on the wards and so on. The NHS is definitely sugar addicted. There's just cake
Yes.
and chocolate everywhere, and if you say you
Everywhere.
don't want it, people are a bit kind of, that makes them feel a little bit, or you don't want it. They feel a bit threatened by that, because they've possibly got their own issues around it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely the case. And yeah, most people do much, much better if they're in some sort of community, Overeaters Anonymous, or, there are quite a few online programs now for food addiction, or, if they've just got a really supportive. I mean, I'm so lucky because obviously David and I just kind of eat the same, and we encourage each other. We don't have anything in the house, these all things that
Yeah.
that we encourage people, just don't buy that stuff. If it's in the house, you're going to eat it, because of. So it all goes back to the ancestral brain, really, that obviously we needed to be extremely motivated to find food to survive. We didn't need to ever restrain the way that we ate. If we came across food, we ate it. That's how we're wired. So if it's in the house, you're going to eat it, because your brain is thinking it's helping you survive. Your
Yes.
ancient brain is going, well, you've got to eat that stuff while it's in the cupboard, and I better get it before David does, or somebody else eats it. There's that drive to eat. So you need to put the barriers there, so it's not around you, particularly in the early days. Later on, it becomes much easier to resist those foods. I don't struggle with that at all now. I can go in a garage, I can walk the gauntlet of crisps and chocolate without a thought. That's not food to me at all. But in the early days, that's difficult, because the visual cues. Or how you go in the supermarket and they've got the bakery right by the door. So I go to Lidl and they have the kind of wafting croissant smell just as you come in.
Yes.
That's cueing. Dopamine's starting. When dopamine starts, is the other thing we didn't talk about in the brain, is that I mentioned that you had to be back in the day brave to go out and hunt stuff, because you might get injured or whatever. When dopamine starts, and the reward centers sort of activated, actually inhibits the frontal lobes to some extent, because the frontal lobes are there. You're going to think, you might think, oh, it's a bit dangerous, or you know, I can't be bothered to go and you know, run to the end of the cliff, or you know, whatever it is. So the frontal lobes sort of shut down, so you're not thinking straight.
Yes.
Once that cueing and that that craving has started, you just kind of, you know, you just single-mindedly going for that thing. So even though you've told yourself earlier in the day, no biscuits today, when I get in from work, I'm definitely not having any biscuits. And you get in from work,
Yeah.
you're a bit tired, you see the packet, the reward center starts thinking, it starts being stimulated. The frontal lobes, which is the sensible bit that where you said you weren't going to have it, that gets shut down. And it's a bit like a guy trying to ride an elephant. You know, once the elephant's off and going, yeah, there's not much you can do about it really. And then you have regrets later on, obviously, when you kind of wake up. But
Yes.
it's not a lack of willpower. It's nothing to do with willpower or moral weakness. It's literally we were the people that would have, well, we did survive, didn't we? Our ancestors
Mm.
led to us being here today, that we were survivors. And I think that's the case, that my relatives were obviously very good at finding food and eating it, and we're very driven to do that, and that's why we're here. It's just that the food environment is nuts. So I mean,
Yes.
the way that anybody can actually be healthy and not be driven by those foods in the world we live in now is something that I find kind of mystifying.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because willpower often comes up in conversations, but you're talking about practical, actionable things to do, removing
Yes.
temptation. That's nothing to do with willpower. That's actually just common sense, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it's taking those actions, you know, knowing all of that information. So we're
mm,
knowing that about the brain. What does it make sense to do? Clear the house out. Number one, we always
yeah,
say that when I've done residential courses, we say, you know, you're gonna go home. Number one, bin bag. You know,
yeah,
get rid of that food. And then there's a big debate about, well, we shouldn't throw away food. Should we give it to someone else? We're like, you want to give something to someone else that's harmful to the health? Well, you know, maybe not.
yes.
Maybe just put
Good
it in the
point.
bin.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so but we always have that debate with everyone. Yeah, so clear out the house and then make available the foods that you are going to be eating. Have those in the house and make a plan. So you're using the frontal lobes and the rational brain at a time when those cravings have not already been triggered. So you make a food plan. You won't have to do it forever. You know, just do it for the first few weeks until you get into those habits. Make a food plan. Tell everybody that you're going to make this change and why, and try and enlist their help. And as you say, you know, maybe explain to them that it is it, it, it is that serious for you, particularly if you've got type 2 diabetes, mental health problems, obesity, whatever sort of challenges you're facing. It's important to sort of enlist other people's help and get them on board as well.
yeah. There's so many takeaways from this. It's amazing. I've written so many notes, but one phrase you use there, which I will use from my future consults, is there's no nutritional value in a biscuit. You never eat a biscuit because it's nutritionally the thing to
It's
do. So
entertainment. That's what we always
yeah,
say.
it
It's
is.
like it's
It's
not
entertainment.
it's not yeah, it's not food, it's entertainment. And food should be fuel, not entertainment. It's the food industry that's made food into entertainment. So ice cream,
Yeah.
biscuits, popcorn. I mean, all of those things. Another thing I always say is, you know, what's the brain and body made of? It's made
Yes.
of protein and fats. You know, more fat
hmm
than people think. Um,
hmm
Minerals and so on. Um, Carbohydrate, no.
No,
No,
no.
no need to eat a banana really, because there's a tiny bit of, people are always surprised when you say, well, how much sugar in an adult human's bloodstream? And the actual answer is 1 teaspoon. Well, a banana is
Yes.
like a ripe banana is 6 teaspoons of sugar. So nobody
Mm.
needs to. David's always has a real loathing of bananas. This is why I'm always saying about bananas. He really loathes bananas.
Yes.
Everybody thinks they're healthy, and like there's no need to eat a banana or a biscuit for energy. And I would
No.
that's the trap I was in because I was brought up in the 60s and 70s where that's what we were told. Carbohydrate with every meal, blah de blah, and I totally bought into that and then couldn't understand why I could, why that would always trigger. I used to drive to work. I went to work pretty early, so I'd take my breakfast with me. And my breakfast was brown bread, banana sandwich. I mean, can you imagine anything worse?
Oh boy.
It's so terrible. And by
Yeah.
10 o'clock, I'd be starving and have to eat my hummus pita bread. I mean, there's no protein, there's very little good fats. And, so my diet's I've done a total 360 now. We always I work with Heidi Yeaber, who's a nutritionist, because obviously as a psychologist, I can't preach nutrition to people, but Heidi's the nutritionist, and we talk about protein, and we see on the residentials particularly how, and again, women in particular, under choose protein. We did one that was like a buffet.
Yes.
It used to be buffets, and we'd sort of show them what we got, and they couldn't believe the amount of protein that we had.
Mm.
And they would always hang back on the protein and the fat, which is the nutrient density that you need,
Yes.
because there's another mechanism whereby the brain and the body's looking to sense that there's enough protein and fat and minerals and vitamins on board, and will kind of keep you seeking food until that's happened. And there's that
Yes.
amazing paper, isn't there, that shows that if you're eating, depending on what you choose, what amount of food you need 3 times a day to get the basic nutrients, and it's
Mm.
7 grams of liver 3 times a day, which is like a heaped teaspoon 3 times a day,
Yeah.
or 4 kilograms of refined grains 3 times a day.
Oh,
So it's 12 kilograms of grains to get. So these grain heavy diets, you're always going to be chasing the nutrition that your body and brain is looking for. So that's another thing that you can do. Absolutely focus very, very clearly on nutritional density at every meal.
yeah, and you can definitely overeat on carbohydrates much more than fats
Oh,
and proteins,
yeah.
and that is it's crazy. The undereating thing I'd definitely like to get into, but
It's that natural
we
GLP-1 thing, isn't it? So,
yes,
that's all the rage at the minute. And if you're trying to maximize your own GLP-1 production, then yeah, protein and fat and exercise are all really good for that.
yeah, and protein definitely elicits and stimulates GLP-1. It goes a long way as well. It produces a signal to uh, cholecystokinin, CCK, that tells the body that you're getting full,
Yeah.
which actually elicits a glucagon response sometimes. Anyway, right. Let's get into the
Yes.
future, because I could bore people with the science and talk to you forever.
Yeah.
But
Same.
how do you see things moving forward, Jen? What's your plans?
Okay, so the plans are, so we've had now a couple of sort of international food addiction conferences in London.
Hmm.
Next year, we're going to go to Poland and team up with the amazing Rodson brothers. If people haven't come across them, they're very well known in Poland for sort of keto, low carb, carnivore, and health. Um, we've been working sort of with international colleagues who are clinicians and researchers and academics, forming a consensus around, ultra processed food addiction. What is it? How do we recognize it? What should we do about it? And calls to get it recognized by the WHO so that it's included in a thing called the ICD, which is the International Classification of Diseases, which the
Disease? Yeah.
WHO hosts. So we've just put in our second submission around that. We did one a few years ago, and it, not surprisingly, got knocked back. So
Mm.
it works on all the points that they sort of brought up where they felt, there wasn't evidence or there wasn't consensus, and then we've put in another proposal. People can actually, if they go on our website, it shows you how to do it. You can go to the WHO platform and you can actually lend your voice, whether that's sort of, again, clinician researcher or lived experience, to support that proposal. So we'd love anybody to do that. You have to actually sign up for the platform. So
Mm.
there's a little bit of kind of jiggery pokery, but if you feel passionate about this topic, we'd really appreciate any comments from anyone sort of supporting that this should be a recognized condition, because I think then once that happens, you get more money for research, you get more money to fund, evidence-based treatments, and professionals will have to learn about it and recognize
Mm.
it and know what to do, what to say, and where to refer people. And as part of that, again, we're just about to launch some healthcare professional training, which is just be a few sessions. It'll be CPD accredited, and it's to get people the sort of knowledge we've been talking about.
Yep.
What causes food addiction, how to recognize it. We've got a screening tool called Craved, which we've developed based on the ICD criteria, that's now been used in a number of research projects and holds up well against the other measures of food addiction. So you learn how to use that and how to talk to people, and where to refer them on eh, if they need more help and more support. So if anyone's listening who's a healthcare professional or knows anyone, again, if you go to our website, you can sign up and we'll let you know when that's going live. Should be either later this year or early next year, and you get some CPD points and learn all about food addiction.
Brilliant. That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
so there's loads to do, obviously,
Yes.
and I'm optimistic. I think even in this last year, there's been so much more interest in the topic. We've managed to get it in the press a few times.
Yes.
Um, so I think we'll get there. I think it's just exactly like cigarettes. They said they weren't addictive. They said they weren't harming your health. It's all fine. It's all good.
And they even promoted them, didn't they? I mean, that's the
The
other thing.
doctors used to give them.
Yeah,
David can remember
promote them.
when he
So,
trained, one of the doctors having them in his desk and saying, to the anxious patients, well, I smoke these. So,
terrible.
that's in living memory, isn't it? And that
Yeah.
now, people don't smoke in public places. You don't see the cigarettes when you go to the shop. They're behind a thing. People can't
Yeah.
advertise them. So I think it'll be the same process. It'll probably take exactly as long, but I'm optimistic that the momentum is there, um, and the will is there, and it's just the emperor's new clothes, isn't it? It's hiding in plain sight. We need to
Yeah.
recognize it and call it out and recognize it for the serious condition, long-term condition that it is.
Brilliant. Jen, I'm going to thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now. For people that want the links, I will ask Jen afterwards to send me the best links she wants to put in the description, and I'll put them in the description. So, Dr.
Great.
Jen Unwin, thank you very much.
Thank you.